to share some insights, tips, ideas on how you can take better control of your life. I use my personal and professional experience to navigate my healing, and then I really like sharing that with other people because I'm not a gatekeeper. So who are you when you're by yourself? If you were to take everybody away, all the external influences, your family, your friends, society, social media, the pressures of the timeline, like, I'm supposed to be here by this age, I'm supposed to be here by this age. If we took all of those external factors away, who would you be and what do you want? I'm 28 years old. I'm a few years into my healing process in terms of not really experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, other mental health issues, even physical ailments that I've struggled with for years and years due to mental health issues. I'm very thankful to have reached a point where I've recognized that a lot of my physical ailments were also due to my mental health and unresolved traumas, stuff like that. So since I've been on this journey, I've had a lot of isolation periods. It's definitely been lonely, but it's definitely been something that was incredibly crucial for me to have to go through in order to grow in the ways that I needed. It gives me ample opportunity to get to know myself and look inward. Years ago, when I was learning to love myself and really kind of force myself to not hate myself and to actually start liking myself and loving myself, I had to really challenge my negative thoughts about myself and my beliefs about myself, and realizing that a lot of external factors and external people and whether it was how I grew up or how I was treated by others or just like subtle messages that you get in your very early developmental years that you kind of latch onto and internalize and make that your self-belief. And if you follow along and you want to hear more about what I share, a big thing that I talk about is developing your self-concept, which is essentially who am I? And that can be a very, very vague and general question, and it can be very overwhelming because, okay, wow, where do I start? I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm an aunt, I'm not all those things, but that's how people kind of think. Oh, I work at this job. Essentially building your identity. But if you think about it, that all the things I mentioned, that's what we kind of usually automatically go to, right? Is who am I? I'm this type of person to other people or to my job or to how are we forming our identity? Other aspects can be your values, your ethics, your morals, your moral compass. That can also be a big part of who you are. And not to say those things don't make up your identity, they do. But I want to challenge people to think about, if I took all the external away, who am I? And who do I want to be? And I walking in alignment with that. I think it's really hard, especially as a young person. I would say maybe even mid-30s and younger. It's very hard for people in these age groups, which I feel like my content can be for anybody at any age, because again, there's no right or wrong time to work on yourself. You're always gonna work on yourself for the rest of your life, hopefully, and want to be a better person. In my last video, I talked about how healing is limitless, and there's really no finish line to being oh, okay, I'm the person I want to be, check. I don't have to work on myself anymore. There's always room for growth and development. The whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't subscribe to it. And I feel like that's often how we get stuck in the ego and like don't allow room for growth or accountability. But that's probably a topic for another day. So right now I'm in grad school for counseling. I should get my master's in the spring. And I work as a counselor, like a counseling intern at an internship for adults with substance use disorder and mental health issues. It's an inpatient with multiple levels of care. I was running a group recently, a few weeks ago, and we were talking about codependency, and codependency can be related to, being codependent with other people, being codependent with substances or negative behaviors. One of the things that was brought up was motivations and what we use as our motivations, and again, like developing a personal relationship with yourself, because in my experience, and then from other people I've met who are in recovery and throughout the years, knowing their stories, I think in early recovery, even for a few years, and again, this is kind of just me sharing my experience and a suggestion. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's advice, but definitely a suggestion, and what I've come to know about the process and experience is that I think in the first few years in early recovery, or when you're not quite developed in your self-love or self-security, it's not as comfortable to feel good about yourself. Self-worth isn't very tangible yet. You gotta use whatever works to get through the day to keep you sober. So if you're choosing recovery to be a better daughter, you don't want to put your loved ones through it anymore, things like that, you have to use whatever works, and I completely respect that, and that's also what I had to do. At the same time, there reaches a certain point, you go in and out of treatment, 10, 15, 20 times, where if you've not created a safe place within yourself, your mind, if you've not developed a personal relationship with yourself, if you're not talking to yourself positively, if you're not believing positive things about yourself, if you're not able to identify positive traits about yourself, take this as it fits, and I don't mean disrespect, but how genuine is your recovery if you're doing it for other people? And you might argue, the other man who, that's what he was saying in the group, who was like, well, how come my girlfriend isn't enough, or my wife isn't enough? If that's what gets me sober, and this is with any healing, this is going to apply to any type of personal healing. Even if you've not struggled with substances, again, I'm applying this to all types of recovery and healing. But you could lose people. You could lose anybody, anything. Nothing in life is guaranteed except for yourself, how you show up for yourself. Nobody's in your head except for you. Nobody's making you do life and perform behaviors and make choices. No one's going to be in your head 24/7, holding your hand along the way the same way all the time. And so this is why I stress getting to know yourself and making your head and your body a safe space for you. Because nobody is guaranteed to death, to loss, to, relationships come and go. And that's not to be negative, that's to be realistic. Because if you're putting all your recovery and healing eggs in one basket, and that basket falls apart, what do you have left? And what's not going to then stop you from going right back into old ways and old patterns? When you have your sense of self, or even if you don't know who you are, but you're able to appreciate appreciate yourself, respect yourself, love yourself, care for yourself, you have at least a solid foundation to fall back on, where even if I lose every single thing in my life, I know that I have me, and I know that I'm the only vehicle to where I want to go. And if I end up homeless one day, if I have no job, no family, no money, I still have me, and I still have that love within me to keep me going. And you will be so shocked, God forbid, that if you end up in a situation where you are experiencing that type of grief and that type of loss, you will be so shocked to know how much that is going to be your saving grace. It's just having yourself on your side. It's not even like preparing for the worst. Like, I didn't even look at it that way. I got very blessed because when I did experience my own life shatter, losing family, losing a home, losing support, and where I really only had myself to rely on, I'm just so grateful that I had reached it in a point in my healing at the time where I had developed that self-love and self-appreciation. So even if I was so depressed and even suicidal and, a victim of the circumstances, I could still come out as a victor because I had a safe place within myself. So maybe I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. Maybe I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. I had only had that happen to me for a short period of time. But thankfully, because I had that foundation, I was able to say, well, look, I know I could get myself to where I want to go because I've done hard things before. I've never been in this situation before, but at least I love myself enough to keep trying and to keep going. And ultimately developing these skills is also going to help build your resilience. And how I understand resilience is your ability to bounce back after a traumatic situation or after unfortunate events. When you're in a lifestyle where it's so easy to fall back into instant gratification and getting that relief right now, that's what's really hard about, forcing yourself to work on yourself and the skills, because it does take patience, it does take consistency. And I've also mentioned this in my last video if you want to check that out. But I would say, arguably those two are the keys of recovery. And I'm going to say it again, even though I said it before, which is often the hardest part in any type of healing and recovery, but especially what I've seen in substance abuse and addiction recovery is consistency and patience are the hardest parts. And the hardest themes to work on. And as human beings, nobody really masters these skills. And if they do, it's because they are always being practiced. These things are practices. We are always going to, I don't really like saying always never either, but I do feel like it's important that we do always practice self-love, self-care, talking positively to ourselves, retraining negative self-talk and thoughts, being aware of our thoughts so we can challenge them. It's going to take work. That's what it is. It's not always going to feel so hard. It's not always going to feel like a chore. It's going to get to a point where it becomes a lot more like second nature. But sometimes it does feel like work. Healing is like this. And it's not always going to be miserable and so energy draining to heal. So that's my original question. Who am I without all these external factors? Who am I when I'm by myself, and who do I want to be? Some examples for me are I have a good sense of humor. I really like making people laugh, and that's definitely something that's very important to me is humor. Being a light, inspiring people, motivating people, that's, I feel like, part of my core as well, because it's a trait that comes very natural to me. It's very natural for me to, as flawed as somebody can be, or as unlikable as somebody can be, it's very natural for me to see the positive qualities about somebody. And so because I feel like I've been hurt so much, as a lot of us have, it is hard to show. The more time goes on and the more the years pass, my trust issues have definitely taken hits, and it's hard to feel like you don't want to show your genuineness because it's a vulnerability that people can take advantage of. So while I am aware of this and I want to work on my boundaries with this, I don't want to let anything in my past, any pain, stop me from being who I am and sharing my life. And that's on me as well. If I start to notice red flags, or if I start to feel taken advantage of, I can always set boundaries. I don't have to abandon part of myself that feels genuine to me and natural. I can still compliment people. If I see something I like about you, I say it. That's also who I am. If I feel like I have something I want to share it out and I help somebody, I say it because that's who I am. Now, moments where I found that can be tricky for me is because I have this nature to want to help people. I tend to make myself overly available or over explain myself, and that is so draining, I noticed, for me. And so I really had to take a big step back the past few years, and even more so as the years are going by, to really assess how I could better balance this trait about myself. Because even though that's a quality, even though these are qualities that make me who I am, that I don't want to lose about myself, it's still not my job to offer so much if it's not being asked of me. Because what happens is, and again, I can't blame other people for this, it's my job to set boundaries, but what happens is that that's something that's so prominent about my personality and about how I show up for my relationships. That's also what becomes expected of me. So I've noticed that if I'm not on all the time, and if I'm not acting in a certain way all the time, then people will be like, oh, well, how come you're, not vocally, but people start to notice, like, oh, how come you're not as helpful? How come you're not as empathetic? How come you're not talking to me as much? And there's really no room for me to have my decompression. I think too, I never realized I was a people pleaser until I started realizing this as well. I always thought I was somebody that could be very open about not liking something that someone does or sticking up for myself. But there's more to not being a people pleaser than being able to stick up for yourself and be your own advocate. And I just didn't realize it until recent years either, where I because I like to help somebody, and what I mentioned, the overly available, that was something that I really lacked boundaries with. And so even if for example, I would make myself very overly available and extra helpful for people that I felt like didn't like me, to gain their approval, to gain their trust, or to essentially so that they would like me. And something that I also have to understand, which everyone, it's important to, is not everyone's gonna like you, and that's okay. You know, we're not here to be liked. We're here to be ourselves, to exist. Does that mean that you're supposed to be disrespectful and you're supposed to be rude to people? No. I mean, we're adults. Hopefully we can critically think a little bit. It's not black or white and it's not all or nothing. But yeah, it's just boundaries. And two things can be true at once, and a bunch of different things can be true at once, even if they contradict each other, especially if they contradict each other. Just some mental tools to keep in mind, or, you know, ideas to play around with. And using myself as an example, like this might not be something you identify with at all. Another example could be I am somebody who is reliable. So if reliability is a value for you, examples of aligning with that behaviorally could be I'm the person of my word. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to follow through with it. I'm someone that follows through with my obligations. If I have to cancel or if something happens, I will make people aware with a good notice. I will make it up to them. That's something that can also be an example for that. So this is starting to get me thinking, because how do we answer the question, who am I, when we're not tying ourselves to other people, other things, other obligations? And so this is definitely something that I'm trying to think more about too, because even as I'm talking about it, it's definitely difficult for me to figure out. I'm definitely someone who wants to travel. Travel is a big priority for me in life. I want to experience, I want to learn more about other people, other cultures, experiencing a certain amount of freedom. So are there certain passions that you have? Are there certain goals or motivations? What's the motivations behind what we're doing? What are we seeking? Even when we engage in negative behaviors, and I would say especially so, we are seeking something, whether it's we're lonely and we're filling a void, or we desire connection, we desire fulfillment, we desire stability, we desire control. How can we make those concepts and put examples to them if there were an ideal situation, an ideal life, or multiple versions of what you would want to see in your life or in yourself, and create your own happy place when imagining a future? And it's never too late. I want to remind everybody that it doesn't matter how old you are. I think that age is only a number in this context. Wink, wink. No, I really do feel like that, because I've lost a lot of friends who didn't make it to 25 or 30, and it really kind of challenges, what does age mean? What does time mean? What am I doing with my time that I have? You know, the oldest story in the book, but cliches are cliched because they're true, is that live each day like your last. Does that mean, I want to spend all my money and enjoy every single day? No. For me, at least, what that means to me is being grateful for what I have, even if the day is boring, mundane, even if I'm sad, even if I'm lonely, even if I'm angry. I still am going to show up for myself, care for myself, try to be the best version of me to other people as much as I can. Your best is not going to look the same every day. Giving yourself grace, forgiving yourself. I think sometimes we have this misguided view of what that means too, but it really is true. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. The present is called the present because it's a gift, and how I spend my time, has a lot to do with how I'm going to experience my life. What is that quote? It's like, spending your days, or how I spend my time is how I live my life, or like, what is that quote? Spending your days, I gotta look that up and revisit. But yeah, it ends up being true, because the skills that I practice and that people in healing and recovery practice, the truth of the matter is you're often not going to reap the benefits or be conscious of them until you reach a point where you look back and you're like, oh my God, like, I really came this far. When was the last time I had that urge? When was the last time I had that negative thought or belief about myself? When was the last time that... It's not always going to be a conscious process, but it's all going to be worth it. And it's going to create... This is about creating the life of your wildest dreams. And I do believe that what you believe you become. And I do believe that the best is yet to come. If you believe that, it makes it more of a guarantee that that is what you will experience. There's a certain amount of surrender and letting go and trusting the practices. Because you're not always going to experience the reward right away. Sometimes you will. And those are the things you have to hold on to. There's something that the program that I internship at, they described it as a glimmer, which is like the opposite of the trigger. It gives you hope, it gives you motivation. It reminds you how magical and how beautiful life is. It could be something so small, which it usually is, because the little things are the big things. It could be something as small as I had a good interaction getting coffee this morning from the barista, or I saw someone, like the other day, this is a good example, I was getting gas. My gas station attendant won a lot of money on like a bet he made. He won like thousands of dollars. He was able to send a lot of his family money in his country. That made me feel so good. I was like, that's so cool, like, good for you, like that. Those are little things that, you know, and whatever it is to you, but glimmers that life, as horrible and evil and, you know, targeted as it can be, it is so important to see the good things about life too, especially when you're someone that has all these forces working against you, whether it's systemic, whether it's mental illness, physical illness, trauma, lack of support, discrimination, racism, disability. Like, there's gotta be some room for positive. Otherwise, you know, like, you make a way where there is no way. And I think that's why faith and, like, believing in a higher power and believing in God helps a lot of people with these concepts and with trusting the recovery process. And I'm not trying to, like, sway anybody one way or another. Like, I think whatever works for you works. But I just wanted to point that out there. That is a big motivator for people to keep going when there just isn't a view, or like, if you cannot see the light of the tunnel, believing that there is one, even if there's like such little evidence. Faith can really help you find evidence for the good ahead. And faith can mean anything. It can mean faith in a higher power. It can mean faith in yourself. It can mean faith in recovery and healing in general. Oh, I saw so-and-so get through it, and that inspires me. And if they can get through it, then other people can get through it. And we see people recover from the most miraculous testimonies all the time, seeking out inspiration, seeking out overcoming. And you're allowed to, like, we are all victims of our circumstances. We're all victims of having like a life here. Like none of us consciously, I guess depending on what you believe in, but we don't consciously, we're not consciously like, oh yeah, let me live this life of pain and hardship. So it is unfortunately up to us to create that, and we do have a lot more say-so than we might ever believe that we do. I would love to hear more about you guys' stories in the comments. If you're watching, if you're struggling, if you don't see like the light, I want to create like a safe space in a community where people can feel free to support each other in the comments, and it will help me like support other people better in my life and the career that I'm working towards. How can we bridge the gap? How can we create safety and validation all around? And I'm not going to sit here and say like, in my experience of, being in and out of treatment for, 10, 15 years and now being involved in counseling in the field, like, that I've heard it all. I've heard a lot. I've met hundreds and hundreds of people, if not over 1,000 people at this point, and heard stories that you couldn't make up. And I still am not comfortable saying I've heard it all, because I've not heard it all. I've not met every single person in the world. I don't know everybody's story. I don't know everybody's dynamic and what they come from and what they've had to overcome. And sometimes it can be really invalidating to hear like, oh, well, if they got through it, you can get through it too. Or if I got through it, because we're not the same people. Everything is different for everybody. Different things work for different people, and we're all coming from our own perspective, and we all have our own perceptions of the world and how it works and the people in it and how we relate to each other. So I definitely want to keep that in mind as well, moving through life on my personal healing journey in my career as a counselor. I never want to lose sight of that. I never want to become tone deaf in that way. And yeah, so if anyone has any questions, any feedback, anything else, please feel free to share in the comments. I'm very lucky that I'm at the place I'm at today. It took a lot of hard work, but I still was blessed every day to have the opportunity to do the work. I did have certain resources that most people don't have, and recognizing that is important. What can we do that is without control, that is in our realm of resources that we can use to our advantage to help heal us? Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.